Hello, folks. Thanks for joining us again this week. Just like always, my name is Jim Reid. I'm going to be your host. I've got a kind of a special message to start off this episode of the podcast. This is a special edition of the podcast. In 2024, we released a series of podcast episodes based specifically around each month's mixed game of the month in our home game club at RecPoker. And it was a big success. And we've continued to play a lot of those mixed games in our home game club, even in beyond the year 2024. So we thought one thing that would be kind of a neat idea would be as those games come up from month to month in our home game club, we would just re-release some of these mixed games episodes from that series in 2024. So some of you may have heard this episode before, but because the subject of this episode is going to be the game that we're playing next month, we thought we would just kind of send these out as a bonus episode. So if you have heard already, we've tried to add some new tips from guests onto the end of the show. We won't be able to do that for every episode, but I think it might be worth re-listening to. There are some great tips on how to enjoy some of these mixed games every month that you'll hear these. And if not, yeah, dig in. I think, we should all be playing more mixed games. There's a lot more to poker than No Limit Hold'em. So, I guess without further ado, I hope that you jump in, join our home game club. It's free to play, but the prizes are real. And like I say, give some mixed games a try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. So we're gonna just roll right into that. You'll hear that episode again right now in its entirety. Thanks for sticking with us, and I look forward to chatting with you next week on the Rec Poker Podcast. It's just a catchy tune. It puts a smile on my face. There's nothing we can do about it. Thanks for tuning in. This is the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm excited to be your host. I've got the best freaking job in the world. I'm Jim Reid, Bluffsterini in the home game, and at Rec Poker Jim on Twitter. And speaking of the home game, this is a special edition of the podcast. We're going to be talking about the mixed game of the month, stud 8 or better. But before I get into that, I have to mention that we're brought to you by Running Aces, the official sponsor of the Rec Poker Podcast. And we really depend on the support from our sponsors and our premium members because most of what we do here is free. We're a largely volunteer-based organization, and you can get a free account at RecPoker yourself by just heading on over. All it takes is an email address and a smile, although we do insist on both. And if you want to take your game to the next level, join our premium membership and get involved with some of our training material. It's only $15 a month, and you can get your first month for only $5 when you use the code RecPoker at checkout. Now, you get used to hearing my voice on Mondays because they let me host the show, but I am just one of the guys and gals on the wrecking crew, which is what we call our leadership panel here at Rec Poker. And I'm privileged to be joined by several wrecking crew members tonight on the show. If you want to find out more about me or the rest of the wrecking crew, you can go to rec.poker/crew, but you can also just listen up because you're going to meet a few of them tonight, starting with John Somsky.
I'm John Somsky, also known as Poker Geek MN Everywhere, and I coordinate our home games.
And I'm Rob Watson. You can find me as Rabman50 just about everywhere. And you can also join us for our book studies on the first and third Wednesdays of each month.
I'm Taylor Moss. You can find me on Twitter at Taylor_Moss or as Gopherboy, TJM in the Rec Poker home game, which I stream live Wednesday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central at twitch.tv/RecPoker.
And home games are just one of the perks of getting involved in our free membership here. And I mentioned at the top, we're doing our different featured mixed game of the month every month in 2024. On the second Wednesday of the month, you get to play a different mixed game every month in our Player of the Year race. And so every month we're releasing a podcast episode going over some strategy tips for how players that are new to this particular mixed game can get the most out of it. So we'll be releasing these on Tuesday. And if I did my math right, tomorrow night, Wednesday night, should be the first practice mixed game for stud 8 or better, which is the game that we'll be playing on the second Wednesday of next month. So, John Somsky, you've been putting this fantastic slate of mixed games together. We've been building on concepts from month to month, and we've gotten to stud 8 or better. Tell us a little bit about how to get the most out of this fantastic mixed game.
So the new concept that is coming in here, this is the first stud variant. It's a 7-card stud game. Unlike most of the other games that we play, this game actually has 5 betting rounds rather than 4. What happens is you are dealt, and there's no shared cards. Everyone has their own cards, and you have some cards that are down, meaning only you know what they are, and some cards that are played face up that the entire table knows what they are. So you start off. In this game, it also is played with antes rather than blinds. So everyone will typically ante. And the ante size is usually anywhere from 10% to 25% of whatever the small bet would be. And you do have small bet and big bet concepts. So you start off, you're dealt 3 cards. 2 of them are down, private to you, 1 card up. That goes all the way around. And then the best card is the one that actually the worst card is the one that has to do the bring in.
And you mean the lowest ranking card, or
in this particular case, it's low, because in 8 or better, the nice part about it is it's another split pot game, just like we played last month in Omaha, where the high wins half the pot and low wins half the pot. So the low cards aren't necessarily bad, but that still has a forced bring in. So that's the only forced, well, that and the blinds, I guess, but it's a forced bet. And you'll typically do a bring in, or you can complete. A complete meaning that you go all the way to the small bet size, whatever that is. And whenever you're playing a stud game or tournament, it'll be well listed what the ante is, what the bring in is, what the small bet is, and what the big bet is. And typically the big bet is double whatever the small bet is. So you're dealt 3 cards, 1 up, 1 down. Whoever is the bring in whoever has the lowest card showing, and if 2 people have a deuce, which is the lowest card, then you go to a tiebreaker, which is suits. And the deuce, it's reverse alphabetical order for the rank. So spades are
Deuce
the
of
highest.
clubs.
So deuce clubs. Thank you,
Deuce of
Rob.
clubs is the lowest possible.
clubs,
You played it
diamonds,
more
hearts,
often, have it
spades?
memorized, and or my brain just doesn't work. Whatever that is.
It can be both.
So you'll bet. The next person then can either complete the bet, meaning they raise it to the small bet, assuming you just did the bring in, and then after that they can raise in increments of whatever that small bet is. And you go around until everyone has either folded or called or whatever. Then you have, and that's known as third street, because you're dealt 4 cards. Or 3 cards rather. Then you go to fourth street.
So the streets don't have to do with how many rounds of betting. It has to do with how many cards you've been dealt. So you get 3 cards, then you have the first round of betting. That's third street.
Yeah, people don't use third street very often, but you do hear 4th street, 5th street, 6th street, all of the other ones, to just let you know what round it is. It's similar to using the terminology pre-flop, flop, turn, and river in holdem. So 4th street, everyone's dealt, who is still in, is dealt 1 more card. And then at that point in time, whoever has the best hand starts the action. So whoever has the highest cards, or if you have a pair, the highest pair at that point.
And these are up cards. So
correct.
You
Only
got the first 2 down. Yeah, you got the first 2 down, then you get the next several up. So everyone can see who's got the best hand of the 2 cards.
Correct. And at this point, they can either check or bet, where a bet is the size of the small bet. And then you go around and everyone calls or raises as appropriate. And again, typically raises are capped at either 4 or 5 raises, depending upon the room that you're playing in. Then you go to 5th Street. 5th Street is a magic street. That is where the bet doubles. You're playing the big bet. So you have 3 rounds of big bet in this game.
Interesting.
Which can kill you if there is any type of heavy action going on.
Mm-hmm.
So Fifth Street is the moment of truth street. It's where you really need to be honest with yourself and don't chase anything that you don't have reasonable chances of making. So you can often speculatively call third and fourth streets and see if something develops in your hand, but you've got to have a solid draw or a solid hand to continue on Fifth Street. So you want to have a 4 cards to a made hand if you're going for a draw or a decent pair or decent low. Again, this is a split pot game, so you will be playing high and low. And this is also a game that you can have some indirection because sometimes it will look like you just have a rock solid low, where what you really have is quads or a full house or something like that, and no one else knows it at that particular point in time. So Fifth, Sixth, and Seventh Street, they're all played the same way, except for now you're doing big bets. The change that happens on Seventh Street is another down card. So in the end, you will have 4 up cards and 3 down cards. And again, you are playing, it's exactly like we did with Omaha last month, where it's an 8 or better qualifier. So your low, the worst card for your low has to be 8 or better. And again, 5 through ace is the best possible low card. And then the high hand will also win half the pot.
Okay, cool. So I can see as we're kind of building on these concepts, there's sort of less to explain because tune in last week or last month rather, and you can learn a lot about the other elements of like 8 or better or the limit betting and that kind of thing. And so 7 card stud is just a cool variant. This is one of the old fashioned kinds of games that like draw poker that used to see in the westerns and that sort of thing. This is a game I used to play with my family growing up around the kitchen table and stuff like that. Taylor?
Yeah, this is the first game though where we're not playing communal cards. And we also have cards visible to like our hand. The draw games, it's not communal cards, but everything's hidden. This is now a game where you're playing your board against someone else's board. Like John said, eventually you're going to have 4 of your cards up. So a lot of this game becomes, what do my up cards show for me, and how does the next one interact with that specific card? And likewise for your opponent, and paying attention to what they're getting for up cards versus what they had previously. Because this is a split pot game, so we're playing for both the highs or the lows or potentially both. So aces are great. We can play for both the highs and the lows, and our opponents don't know when our next card potentially helps or hurts our hand. But when we play a hand that has a deuce or a 3 up, usually more likely that we're playing for the low. And then when a jack comes on the next card, our opponents can tell that that's not good for us. Likewise, when we play a jack or a queen and then a low card comes out, that can be another detrimental thing to our hand. It also works for our opponents and paying attention to what they have out there. So it becomes a really fun game of observing and watching what your opponents are drawing into, because you can see the times where their hand weakens or their hand strengthens, and you have to be able to adapt to those different things.
And I guess as players are folding, their up cards are getting removed and mucked. So it's really important to be paying attention to the up cards of every player in the early streets, because then you're going to know what cards are not available for hands that people are trying to make on later streets. Like if you notice that someone's going for a flush draw, and it matters if some of the players folded hearts on an earlier street.
Yeah, it's more important in stud to pay attention than most other games, because you have information available to you that is going to go away. When someone folds, their up cards are no longer visible. But that was information that you should have and should be able to take into account. For example, let's say you're dealt ace deuce 5, and everyone else in the board that you see pre-flop becomes you has a 3 or a 4 showing.
Right.
That's not great for your hand, because you're now limited. Chances of you getting a 3 or 4 are pretty low. So eliminated a lot of your straights, you've eliminated a lot of your low draws. So that information is information you have, and you should be making use of it.
I love that. Any other thoughts here, guys? Yeah, Taylor.
Yeah, another thing. Last week we talked, or was it last? Yeah, it was last week, Omaha 8. We were talking about, hey, be very aware last month.
That's what it was. Yeah.
That's the time frame I was thinking about. We were talking about like, hey, be cautious of 8 high lows and like what that means, because it's, you know, barely qualifying. In stud 8 or better, since you're not playing communal cards, just having a low becomes a very beneficial thing. John talked last month about how 8s and 9s aren't all that great. I feel like he's doing 8s wrong by looping 9s in with them, because 9s are like terrible in these games. Like they're just like downright worse. But that becomes very clear in the stud 8, because there's a clear line drawn between the value of having an 8 versus having a 9 showing or in your hand, because that is the qualifying piece of if you can have an 8 low or better. So if you have an 8 low and you can see your opponent's cards and you know they have 3 cards showing that are higher than an 8, well, you're guaranteed half the pot in that situation where you have a made low that's 8 or better and your opponent cannot possibly have a low. So you have to be very paying attention to those different situations. So there is very much a clear line drawn between the value of an 8 versus the value of a 9 and the up cards that your opponents might potentially have.
Rob?
I was just going to say, it's the other thing that is very, very similar to Omaha 8 is that you want to scoop. You know, it's the biggest rule. You want to scoop. You want to be able to have the types of hands that can give you both the high and the low, and you can scoop. And I love what Taylor was saying, because it's so easy to see what your opponent has and to determine the strength of your actual hand, much more so than in a flop game where everybody's sharing cards. You don't know what their other cards are. We're here, you know exactly what 4 of their cards are going to be at the end, right? So it's very important. And there's another interesting little rhyme: 3 big or 3 little, but never in the middle. So if you're playing stud 8, you look for 3 cards that are high or big cards, or 3 little cards, but never those medium cards, because they're just going to get crushed, either the high or the low.
I love it. Great tip. Anything else on stud 8 or better, gang, or shall we turn this over to this fantastic phalanx of poker pros and celebrities that are coming along right behind us here to offer some fantastic tips on how to play stud 8 or better. So enjoy, and we'll see you a little later on. All right, Chad McVean, give us some advice on how to play stud 8 or better.
Stud 8 or better. Well, it is kind of like Omaha 8 or better, where you definitely want to have a lean towards the low. But the one thing with stud is you have so many betting rounds that it's going to cost you a lot if you stay throughout the hand. You start with 3 cards, you're getting 4 more cards. That's 5 rounds of betting, with the last 2 rounds being double. So that can cost you up to 9 big bets, assuming no raises. So you want to start solid. If you don't have anything after the 4th, 5th card, just get out of there.
All right, Chris Fox Wallace, give me a tip on how to play stud 8 or better.
Man, I could talk about this game all day. I love this game.
Nice.
The stud 8 variants are like my favorite games. I think something that you know most people won't tell you. I'm trying to come up with unique advice for these things, because I know you're talking to a lot of people about these things. Something that people won't tell you is the difference in equity for high hands, depending on how many opponents you have. A pair of kings plays great heads up and miserably 3 or 4-handed. You know, ace deuce 5 plays great 4-handed and not all that well heads up. So go learn about that stuff and how much equity those things have, and then consider that when you're playing those pots. You know, should I be raising here with my ace deuce 4 when I'm heads up? No. especially against the guy who's showing a king. Why are you raising? You're not raising. If it's 2, 3, 4, really don't raise. You don't even have an overcard then, right? You're just hoping that you're low or some sort of miracle high comes in. So, if it's folded around to you in late position, don't be afraid to raise that pair of kings or that, or especially that 6 that has a buried pair of kings. That's a great spot for that. Raise that up from almost any position because you're trying to limit the field. But if there's a bunch of low cards behind you and you think 4 people are going to call, just throw those kings away. They're no good.
All right, Kathy Chang, give me some advice on how to play stud 8 or better.
So stud 8 or better, it's similar to 08 in that you want to try to get a high hand and a low hand to scoop. And so to do that, a good starting hand would be like, say, for instance, 3 of a kind, which we would call in stud rolled up. And then also 3 low cards to a straight flush, like say ace, deuce, 3 of hearts, that you could win the high hand. You could possibly win the low hand. And it's really fun to play these hands because in stud, the bring in would be usually the low card. In stud 8, the low card could also be of help to you. And so if you have a deuce as your up card, that could help potentially give you the 5 card that you need for the low or the 5 cards that you need for the high, and you could proceed along that way.
All right, Mike Patrick, give me some advice on how to play stud 8 or better.
All right. Best tip I can give you guys for stud 8 or better is right in the name of the game. It is stud 8 or better. If you see a 9 or a 10 or something in those ranges, just no, throw it away. You don't want a 9 or a 10 in your hand. They're the worst cards in the deck in your hand. You can have an ace up with a deuce in the hole and your other card's a 9. It's useless. You're basically handcuffing yourself by 1 card going forward as soon as you see a card like that. So basically, you always want to have 3 to a low if you're going to go that way. You do not want to have like a reverse dangler as if it was, a PLO hand where you don't want the baby. Instead, you don't want the 1 random high card. So if you are starting out with, a nice low connected hand with deuce 3, 4 or 3, 4, 6 of all of 1 suit or ace 4, 5, something like that, you're going to be in way better shape. As soon as you see a 9 or a 10 in your hand, just block it. It's just not going to be worth it.
All right, Robbie Strazynski, give me some advice on how to play stud 8 or better.
If you've got a high hand, like a good made high hand early on during the action on 3rd Street, 4th Street, make the lows pay to get them. You see people chasing, like they got a 2 and a 3. You've already got like a pocket kings down, or even pocket 9s, something like that, or split aces, something of that degree. Charge them. Don't get all panicked. Oh, they may get the low on me. Make them hit that low first. Charge them the maximum. So highs can be okay. Just make sure you don't get scooped by 7s.
Okay, Shannon Van Den Berg, give me some tips on how to play stud 8 or better.
Stud 8 or better, top 3 tips. It's a beautiful game, stud 8. I really like it. It's one of my favorite games. Starting hands, your starting 3 cards are the key, and you want to start with scooping hands or really strong one-way hands. Rolled up low cards, so rolled up 3 of a kind in your first 3 starting cards, are better than 9+ because you can still make backdoor lows. And you're also blocking some low cards for your opponents, for them making wheels and so on. And the third thing would be start getting used to remembering the up cards of everybody else's hand. So whether it be their starting third, so their face card, but also when there's players in the pot, start remembering what got dealt to each player that's now folded out of the pot. How would it have helped your hand? How could it be helping somebody else's hand? Are they blocking you? Is it blocking them? So you need to think. You get a lot of information in the stud rounds, you need to start remembering.
All right. Well, that was another fun conversation about mixed games. My thanks to, of course, the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino for their support over the years. To John Somsky and the other members of our Wrecking Crew panel here talking about their love of mixed games, and all our fantastic guests who contributed their segments, their thoughts and tips and advice on how to get the most out of some different mixed games that we're going to be playing. So I'd encourage you, head on over to rec.poker, sign up for a free account there. You can go to rec.poker/home game and find out all about the different mixed games that are being played throughout the year, a different one every month. And I would encourage our listeners, if you're a no limit hold'em player, dip a toe into some of the mixed games. You'll be surprised how much fun you can have. So without further ado, I'll just say thanks for joining us for another week of the RecPoker podcast. And I hope I get to see you all again next week or sometime real soon. Good luck on the felt, folks. Thanks again. Bye for now.